The most important game on TCU's schedule this season, it comes early. It's a home game against UCF. I'll explain next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, we're presented by FanDuel today. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. We're free and available wherever it is you get your podcast. We're talking about the most important game on TCU's schedule in this upcoming season, the game that will sort of set the tone for what the season is going to be. I always feel like SMU is a big game because it's just one of those where SMU always wants to beat TCU. It's a big game for them. They're always going to get up for it. Even now that they're a Power 5 team moving into the ACC, I feel like that's just going to be a huge measuring stick game for them. They're going to give TCU their best shot, and it's usually a good indication of how the season's going to go. But I'm less worried about that game now because it feels like, there are certain teams, certain opponents that coaches just seem to have the upper hand on, or maybe because of the extra motivation, because of the history, the teams are just always prepared for them. Even towards the end of Gary Patterson's tenure, when TCU was really struggling, they still played well against Texas and Baylor. They found a way to get up for those ball games. I think Coach P understood the importance of winning those in-state rivalry games, those games that really matter on your schedule. And so even in some down years, he would upset Baylor, he would upset Texas, or play those teams super competitively to the point that it was a great ball game when you didn't expect it, because it just felt like he always had a really good game plan and had the team ready to rock for those games, had those circled on the calendar. I feel like Sonny has approached SMU the same way. A couple years back, there was so much buildup, him returning to Dallas. They were going to boo him. It was going to be a great environment, all those things. TCU went in there and took care of business. It ended up being a one-score game, but ultimately they took care of business. Last season, a lot of hype about that team being the best SMU team ever, or best SMU team in a long time. Most talented. They come into Fort Worth. They had just played Oklahoma well, either the week before or a couple weeks before that. And TCU won that game pretty handily. It was probably the most complete game they played all season long, outside of maybe BYU. To be honest, felt like definitely the most complete game they played when Chandler Morris was the quarterback there. So I don't really worry as much about that rivalry game, even though I still feel like it's a big one. There's some huge games this year that I think are going to tell you a lot about the toughness of this TCU team. Going to Utah on a Saturday night in October. Now, thankfully, you have a bye week before that, so you're going to have some extra time to prepare and heal up, but that's a physical team. That's a team that under Kyle Whittingham, they're just consistently good. They're nasty. They're going to hit you. Big-time environment there in Utah. Going to Kansas against Jalen Daniels, who will probably be one of the picks as, offensive player of the year in the Big 12. Might get a little bit of Heisman buzz. Hard to tell because he's dealt with injuries so much and not sure what his availability is going to be. But when he's been available, he's been electric and really good for Kansas. That game's going to be played at Arrowhead Stadium. Maybe that helps TCU in some ways because it takes out some of the great environment there, because they're not going to fill it up like they would the Kansas football stadium, as they're working on improving those facilities. But that's also one that's going to be huge. Hosting Oklahoma State, hosting Arizona, all those games are big. But the game to me that early in the year is the most important, and that will tell the story of what TCU is going to do this season, is a matchup against UCF. Now, the non-conference games are important. And I think as far as bowl eligibility goes, that goes a long way in determining whether or not you can make it. Because in the years that TCU's gone 5-7, when Coach P was here, dropped a couple games to SMU in 2019 and 2021. And then last season with Sonny, you immediately drop that Colorado game and start the season 0-1. You want to win your non-conference game. So going on the road to play Stanford to open the season, need to find a way to get a victory there. Then you get LIU, which is basically your, FCS scrimmage, and then you close it out in Dallas at SMU. But sandwiched in between that Long Island and SMU game is a home game against UCF. Gus Malzahn, year 2 of the Big 12. TCU didn't get UCF last season. KJ Jefferson, their new quarterback. And one thing that I thought was kind of weird, there was never really any connection between KJ and TCU in the portal. There were some rumors when he initially hit the portal because, okay, he played with Kendall Briles at Arkansas. That would make sense as soon as he was available. That was an easy, team to put on the list of, hey, that's a possibility, right? He links up with his old play caller, competes against Josh Hoover. If he wins the job, he gets to work. I didn't think it made a ton of sense to bring in KJ Jefferson because, one, I just feel like he was looking for a spot where he was guaranteed to be a starter. I don't know what UCF told him in the recruiting process. Maybe they said there was going to be some sort of competition, but I think the bottom line is he was looking for a place to play. And then also, I feel like KJ Jefferson in year 4, his ceiling is pretty similar to Josh Hoover. They're very different players. Like, they're going to go about it in different ways. KJ is going to use his legs a lot and just that big frame that he has to get extra yardage. But there was a pretty divisive reaction to TCU's potential interest in him, which really turned out to be they weren't interested in him. And again, I think it just didn't make a ton of sense for either party. But there were people that thought absolutely have to go get him. And then there were folks that were like, I don't think he's a good quarterback, which to me, that's pretty crazy. I think KJ Jefferson's a very serviceable QB. And yeah, you have to run on offense to fit his skill set, but you can do it and be effective. I mean, they were really good in the SEC 2 seasons ago. Last year was a disaster, but Gus Malzahn, known for working well with mobile quarterbacks, known for being creative as a play caller. This is a talented UCF group. They had a really good recruiting class in 2023 or the 2024 class that's incoming, I should say. They've used this jump to the Big 12 to their advantage. Big time fan base, big alumni base, a lot of students there. They're trying to build something here. And I think this is going to be a team to watch in the Big 12. So early in the season, we talked about what do you want to see from TCU this year? Yes, I'd love to see them pull off some upsets and be in contention at the end of the year for the Big 12 title. But I think as far as taking a step in consistency and taking a step up from what they did this past season, you got to win some of these coin flip games or games that you should win. UCF at home is a game that you should win. I think that's a talented team. You're installing a new defense. I also feel like it's just going to be a really good barometer for the first time of, okay, what does an Andy Avalos defense really look like? You'll get a peek of it against Stanford, and then you play Long Island, which that won't, that shouldn't be much of a tell either way. But against the UCF team where you have a pretty good idea of probably what they're going to do, they're going to run the ball downhill, especially with their quarterback. Can you stop that? Can you find a way to force them into uncomfortable situations, to throw the football? Can you create pressure against a guy who can move out of the pocket and shake off defenders and extend the play and make things happen? If you can beat UCF and you look good doing it, then I feel pretty optimistic about where they could go the rest of the season. Is this offense? I love the weapons that they have on offense. I've said it before. To me, it begins and ends with what can you do with this O-line? Can you cobble together 5 guys that are going to work together in concert, play well, be effective, be able to run the ball, give Josh Hoover time. But these skill positions, man, I mean, Jack Besh is having a really good spring camp. We've heard from Sonny Dykes that he likes the potential there. Eric McAllister, Drake Dabney. I think there's some, and that's not even getting into like Savion Williams, JP Richardson, a lot of the guys that are returning. I think there's some real opportunities to exploit mismatches, to spread the ball around, to make things happen. If you can line up and run the ball effectively, put yourself in good down and distance, and allow your quarterback to process and make decisions and make things happen. So in my mind, this game against UCF, big opportunity for TCU. I want to hear from you, though. You can do it in the YouTube comments. You can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. It doesn't have to be an early season game, but what in your mind is the most important game for TCU this season? Is it one of those rivalry games? Is it against Baylor late in the year? Is it hosting Arizona late in the season? Hopefully that's a game with some Big 12 championship type stakes, and you're playing a really talented Arizona team with a new coach in Fort Worth with a chance to go to Arlington at the end of the year. What are the games that you have circled on your calendar for this upcoming year that are going to tell the story of what TCU will be this season? because, yeah, 1 week doesn't make the season, but I think there's certain ball games. We could tell even early in the year last year, the loss to Colorado, a pretty flat performance against Nicholls State. I mean, they won the ball game, but it left a lot to be desired. And then they kind of had an uptick against like Houston and SMU. And after that, things sort of gradually deteriorated and fell off a cliff. But what are the games that you're looking at that are going to tell you, okay, how good is this team really this next season? And what can we expect from them in 2024 under Sonny Dykes? Because I feel like this one against UCF is definitely a game where if you can slow down a KJ Jefferson-led offense, if you can find a way to be efficient and effective with your own offense, to score in the red zone, chains moving, to have a little bit of ball control, even if you're going fast, to just extend some drives and allow your defense to take a collective breath and get a chance to regroup, that will tell you a lot about how this season will unfold. I have that one circled. I want to hear from you, though, in the YouTube comments and elsewhere. At SimcockSteven, at Locked On TCU. You can hit me up on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call that website or app. When we come back, a former TCU basketball player has landed somewhere in the transfer portal, so we'll break that down. And next, it's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I started the show telling you about them, FanDuel. Great place. FanDuel.com/lockedon or the FanDuel app. If you want to try to make some money and bet on the NBA, playoffs getting started this weekend, playing games starting tonight, NHL, baseball's in full swing, $150 in bonus bets for new customers if you place one bet, win or lose. You don't even have to win your first bet. If you just place a bet and get involved on the action on FanDuel, $150 in bonus bets that you can get to business and start playing around with. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs and slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Make the leap today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win by getting that extra $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel, it's America's sportsbook. Everything you can imagine in the betting world, you can do it as part of FanDuel. I'm imagining if you listen to this podcast and you're somebody who loves sports, you're probably a pretty competitive person. I'm a competitive person. When I was growing up, we used to have family game night, and then we had to cancel family game night because if I lost or if my team lost, I wasn't the most fun person to be around. Now, is that something I'm necessarily proud of? Not really all the time, but hey, that's who I am. I want to win. I want, whatever it is, I want to get a victory. I don't like to let my kids win. I'm a competitive guy. I want to win, and I can get my competitiveness drive, and I can exercise that by playing Monopoly Go. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. And the best part is you can play with your friends and mess with them. You can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. And the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just your competitive side that will love it. You'll team up with friends, and you can play with people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. So TCU, if you missed it, the basketball team, they're working in the portal right now. They landed C.J. Walker, forward from UCF. He averaged about 7 points and 5 rebounds last season. Good size, good frame, 6'8", 220. Is known as a good rebounder, good defender, someone who's going to hustle, make plays. I think he'll be a valuable part of the rotation this upcoming season. Also landed Frankie Collins from Arizona State, who will presumably be your point guard. Frankie spent his first season at Michigan and the last 2 years playing for the Sun Devils. Averaged 13.8 points per game last year, which is a good stat. Did struggle with efficiency, to be honest and plain about it. But it seems like the hope is if you're asking him to run your offense and distribute more and not be a volume scorer, he can be more efficient on the offensive side of the ball. I still think TCU really needs to add some shooters. They had Noah Reynolds in, guard from Green Bay, who averaged 20 points a game last year, shot about 50% from the field. Got to have people that can space the floor. One of the big issues in the half court last year, once Trey Tennyson cooled off and Chuck O'Bannon was such a streaky player, there wasn't a consistent shooter who could make things happen from beyond the arc. You saw more and more teams go to the zone. You also saw teams blitz guards and pick and roll, try to force turnovers. It really limited what TCU could do in their sets in the half court, and that was, a big reason why, as the season went on, they continued to struggle on the offensive side of the ball. So need more shooting. I know they're going to address that. One thing I'll mention as well, Micah Peavy was in the portal. Now, there was a slight chance that maybe he comes back. He was also getting his NBA draft grade, but he committed to Georgetown yesterday. So he'll be going and playing for the Hoyas. TCU had that really crazy win on the Emmanuel Miller 3-ball at the buzzer where it looked like maybe he stepped out of bounds, but hey, it still counted. But hit that 3 at the buzzer to beat Georgetown on the road. And they played the Hoyas a few times in the past 3 or 4 years. But, yeah, Micah Peavy headed to Georgetown to play for Ed Cooley there. And, we'll see where Jacoby Coles lands. I do think one reason why I've said before, I'm not going to belabor the point. I totally understand why some people are frustrated with Jamie Dixon and the idea of just getting knocked out in the first week in the tournament. But I think last year's team, it stunk because they faltered down the stretch. But overall, I feel like that group making the tourney in some ways was meeting expectations. I'm just not sure. It was sort of a rebuilding year. Some of the guys that transferred in, Ernest Uday wasn't. I think Ernest Uday can end up being a really good player for this team. He wasn't the offensive threat that I thought he could be this past season. Jameer Nelson Jr. was sort of up and down at times. Avery Anderson, I appreciate, what he did for the program. I think he was great at the beginning of the year. It seems like he sort of lost his shooting stroke as the season went on. But I think this next crew, with some of the talent they have coming in, could really make something happen. And I'm hopeful that's the case. But we'll see, what Jamie Dixon continues to do building here. Now, talent on the roster, that's also the coach's responsibility. He's got to build a roster that makes sense. He's got to build a roster that can get it done. And, to be honest, Jamie didn't do that this past year. That group didn't come together and gel like you would like them to. And then I think you had a team the previous 2 seasons that could have made a run, and you lost a close game to Arizona and then kind of faltered down the stretch 2 years ago and ran into a bad matchup against Gonzaga. So it'll be interesting to see what they look like this year and how they kind of add to the portal after that. But man, what an interesting destination there, Georgetown. I think I love Micah Peavy. I think he's improved a lot. And he's also been playing college basketball for a long time. I wish him the best of luck there in the Big East, and I hope it's a good fit for him. But yeah, he'll get another chance to improve on his game and maybe continue to grow as a scorer and a complete player elsewhere. But he's not coming back to TCU. He's going to end up going to play for the Hoyas, so TCU will have to replace that production this upcoming season. When we come back, I didn't get to your audience reaction yesterday, so I'll do some of that next. It's Locked on Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. We talk about how important recruiting is on almost a daily basis on this show. It's the lifeblood of college sports. It's also what makes your small business run. If you need to hire people, if you're in the business of hiring folks for your small business, you need to find professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools to help you find professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't get anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job that might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if they're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that as a small business owner, you're wearing a lot of different hats. You don't have time to sift through hundreds of resumes and applications. So let LinkedIn make the process easy for you. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Again, that's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So you can always chime in on YouTube in the comments. That's probably the easiest way to get in on the conversation of the show. You can also tweet at me at SimcockSteven. The show is at Locked On TCU. A couple days ago, I talked about Sonny Dykes He came in as 7th on a list of Big 12 coaches. And I said, listen, I can't, I spent a lot of time a couple of years ago defending Sonny, or this past offseason, I guess I defended Sonny. And I thought he should have got more love in these top 25 coaching lists or best coaches in the Big 12 list. And then they came out and they went 5-7, and it kind of killed my theory to a certain extent. So consistency is going to be key. I think that's what people are looking for when it comes to how do you value him as a coach. He had such a high, but then it sort of bottomed out last season. One YouTube user says Sonny came in at the perfect time, a team with great leadership and a desire that seemed afraid to make mistakes in the prior years. Sonny's calming demeanor allowed the team to play relaxed, and obviously the results spoke for themselves. I do think he's a good coach, and this year will show it. Yeah, I agree with you about the timing. I mean, that was a talented crew. It seemed like with Coach P, they had lost, his voice to a certain extent. It wasn't clicking. It wasn't working. And so you brought in a polar opposite personality from what we can tell, right? We're not at practice every day. We don't know what he's like behind the scenes, but it seems like for the most part, Sonny's the type of guy that's going to trust his players, trust his coaches, be a little more hands-off, be more of a CEO type, and he's not yelling 24/7. He's not as intense. And I think that core group really responded to that because it was very different than what they had experienced in the past. They had great senior leadership, great players that kept them accountable. And then also I think success creates success, right? Like when you're doing good, when you're doing well, it's easy to buy in. And for those guys, it was such a 180 that I'm sure they were like, okay, this is great. We're just going to keep buying into what is being taught to us here. It's working for us. And that just continued to kind of feed into itself. And that's why they're able to hold themselves accountable last year or a couple of years ago. And this year, it doesn't really feel like that came together. But hopefully this next season, they can get back to some of that. Richard Berry says Sonny has essentially done the same thing he did in year one, but the defense, quarterback, and O-line didn't perform due to the talent gap from 22 to 23. Those are huge factors, and he's made moves to fix them. What he's done is bring in better recruiting classes. Now we just need to win and get these high school kids here. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a reload year. I think they did a good job of addressing the offensive line issues. We'll have to see what the results look like, but at least on paper, I feel like they're putting together a unit that can work. Quarterback, they sort of stumbled upon Josh Hoover middle of the season. Hopefully he can progress and take the next step this upcoming year. I hate that he's missing spring reps, but it is what it is. And then defensively, they're doing a 180 with philosophy, right? They're getting more aggressive. They're going to change coverages up a lot, bring more pressure. And so all those things hopefully will be beneficial. It means more risk on the defensive side of the ball. But as I've said before, they were giving up so many big plays anyway without taking risk. At least if you're coming after the quarterback, hopefully you're causing some havoc, messing up timing, creating sacks. And even if you give up big plays time to time, those splash plays that you make in return will help offset that. Doug said, I like Sonny. He led the team to an incredible first year. I think he's too hands-off in some situations. Last season's red zone issues and the first year, the goal line issues in the Big 12 championship game. I feel like he should have been all over the decision-making and correction steps as the buck stops with him, not coordinators or staff. Sure, I mean, it does. And I feel like the undisciplined nature of last year's team, that was a reflection of him and how they approached it last season. Now, they got to fix that, right? Like, the Kendall Browse experiment wasn't a huge success last year, and he's got to improve, but ultimately if it doesn't work, it's on Sonny. He's got to wear that. And maybe he does take more of a hands-on approach with some of those things and try to tweak some things to make it better. Tanner McKinney says, I think the defense will be good this season. They're rushing well and getting INTs in practice. He's worried about the offense. Is the defense going to be that good or is the offense that bad? I assume you're talking about how the defense has kind of gotten the better of the offense as camp has gone on. It's a good question. I mean, we can't say for sure. I think Josh Hoover being out is certainly part of that. The O-line seemed to struggle about midway through camp with a lot of the different rush looks that they were getting. And so that was a factor. And my biggest concern was the reports they just weren't running the ball well and haven't been running the ball super well. Hopefully that gets worked out. I think the INTs, some of that stuff is as camp goes on, I feel like the defense starts to recognize and react better to what the offense is doing because there's only so many things you're going to run in spring practice. So I'm sure there's some repetitive nature to some of the plays and concepts they're trying to get the defense with through the year. And Jacob Langford, he actually said this on yesterday's video, but he mentioned men's tennis closing out the season. Yeah, Big 12 tournament coming up, and I also hope to make another big run. They're ranked number 2 in the country right now. I do wonder, though, Jacob, is that team healthy? Because last year that was kind of what led to them running out of gas at the end of the season, and I hope they're healthy and at full strength going into the postseason so they can make a run, but we'll have to keep our fingers crossed and see what happens here over the next few weeks. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day.